This is my space.
Slide over. I throw elbows when I talk.
All right, the Administration and Finance Committee will come to order. All 5 members are present. And item 1 is a discussion of the 2023 City of West Dallas Mayor's recommended budget. Mayor Devine.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. We're back. I'm happy to present to you the recommended budget for 2023 and strategic plan. There are, as you probably saw in the cover letter, the couple of initiatives I just want to talk briefly about before we go into the deep dive. A lot of things are continuing that we started last year. There is one that I want to talk about right off the bat because I'm sure when you read it, you wanted to make sure you read it correctly. But that is a pilot sterilization project for rodents, which is actually something that was sent to me by a resident. It was showing success in, I believe it was Tucson. It was a city in Arizona. And this is a liquid, milkish liquid that apparently rodents go crazy for, and it sterilizes them. And then the first question I had was, what about people's pets if they drink this milk? And then there's a part of me that thinks you should have your pet spayed or neutered already. So we're still looking into the depth of that, but there is money in the budget to try that as kind of a pilot program this year. I don't yet know if this liquid freezes, if it's going to be seasonal, but it is something we're considering. Also highlight the continued use and expansion of the flock security cameras that we tried last year, and they have had just tons of successes in highlighting stolen cars, and often these stolen cars have drugs, weapons, things like that in them. So the initial pilot program had a certain amount, $25,000 worth. I believe it was 21 cameras going down to 10, but this will bring that back up close to 2021 cameras for the city. And there are several other safety and efficiency elements in the Axon product that is listed for our officers. There are some alignments to the strategic plan, and I want to talk quickly about the 2.5 annual increase for regular general fund employees. We are always talking with other communities on what they're doing and trying to remain competitive in the public sector and not lose people to the private sector. So we did try to put in as much of an annual increase as we could, and it continues the trend of incentivizing people to live in the city with extra funds for that. So I will say last year, the budget for this year was one of the most difficult budgets I've experienced. This year was definitely difficult and definitely tough, but it was not as bad as last year, and those reasons will get highlighted in the PowerPoint this evening. So the question everyone's going to ask is, how will this impact an average home in West Dallas? And that would be about $15 a year on the city portion of property taxes, which I always like to break down to, this is about $1.25 a month, and it's about, I believe it's 31 cents a week to initiate all of these proposals and within the budget. So with that being said, I want to thank all of you for the leadership. I want to thank the leadership team for the city, and I want to give very strong and specific thanks to Jason Kazmarek and Deputy Director in Finance Chris Mullen, as well as City Administrator Rebecca Grill. So the public hearing will take place on the 1st of November. The council will vote on this on November 15th. If anybody has any amendments, we ask that you get those in by October 27th, I believe it was, 28th. Friday, yeah. I don't know if anybody has any questions at this point. Otherwise, I will turn things over to the City Administrator.
I'm Rebecca Grill, the City Administrator. I'm going to go over the vision and mission statement as well as demographics and our strategic plan focus before we dive into the budget. So we're working to become the preferred city for visitors, residents, and businesses, and how we're doing that is through cost-effective municipal services, providing for the health, safety, and welfare of the community, and we're always looking at progressive approaches to how we're providing the services. The demographics of the city are a little bit over 60,000. We seem to be going back and forth around that 60,000. The owner occupied, last year it was just 52%, so it went up 0.3%. The median value, I think it was 147 last year, so it's gone up a little, and then the household income has gone up about 1,500. Persons in poverty, I believe that stayed the same, and the persons over 65, I believe that went up 0.4 since last year. The strategic plan that the council adopted for 2022-26, we have 5 different focus areas: community, destination, financial, infrastructure, and organizational excellence. So along with the focused budget priorities, all of the business plans and the activities of the departments are developed around this strategic plan. The mayor discussed the budget priorities. There's 2 components: the neighborhood initiatives and the public safety. So we're going to continue to focus on the neighborhood associations. We're working to possibly have a pavilion at Liberty Heights. You mentioned the pest control measures, and then we're going to be utilizing more of the utilizing the summary abatement ordinance that the council passed in August. The black cameras he already mentioned, and then additional parking enforcement, and then the expansion of the Axon product. Usually I just put the city focus challenges here and talked a little bit about the levy limits and expenditure restraint, but we're really coming up on the state funding structure is just unsustainable for us. We're very lucky this year that we had some changes in revenue as well as a 0% increase for our health insurance. But not for that, we might be in the same place that we were last year with eliminating positions that were filled. And so we really need to focus with the legislators to get them to understand that this is not a sustainable course for municipalities. We are one of the states that has the highest reliance on property taxes for operations. Our state aids have been stagnant for years, and then we have the expenditure restraint and levy limits. Our public safety budget growth is grows faster than our normal general government. We have the aging infrastructure that I mentioned about recruiting and retention of the employees, and then we have the taxpayer limitations for the city. So here's a little bit about the over-reliance on property taxes. So for the city of West Allis, 63% of our revenues for the general fund are property taxes.
And this would be typical for a Wisconsin community. And then also notice how the next biggest chunk, 19%, almost entirely of state aids as well. So very little room for additional revenue growth outside of taxes and state aids. And
we're limited in increasing the taxes too because of the levy limits. Not that you would want to do that, but that is limited too. The state aids have remained flat for many years. Jason, did you want to talk about this?
Sure. So, I mean, just going back to this slide here quickly too. So a pretty decent chunk here, 19%. Actually, technically 18% of that whole piece there is just state aids itself. The state has kept that flat. So at least with our levy, they allow us to go up a little bit, but they've kept the state aids just, it's like a handcuff almost. We get to use it for our general operations of the city, but they're not giving us any more to offset cost increases.
And on that subject, Jason, the state has $4 billion extra. Is that the number? Am I correct? If anyone can correct me if I'm wrong.
I had heard
Estimate
3 to 4.
somewhere.
$3 billion surplus extra. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And I just made a point in here on this slide too, that even if they gave us a modest 2% increase, we could have, doubled our capacity that we got with the levy limit. So just even that little bit would help quite a bit.
And then you're all familiar with the expenditure restraint program. We get about $1.5 million a year if we limit our expenditures. This year, if we were just under this, we would have been able to raise, like 6 or 7%.
Yeah, so this year's limit was 8.1%. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, but we were not able to take advantage of that. And then the history of the expenditure restraint, it was established in 1990. In 94, you had to maintain 5 mills up, and it was changed. Funding was set at $42 million. In 2003, it went up to $58 million for 100 more towns, villages, and cities. And since then, it's remained at the 2003 levels. So it's it's not helping it either. But we can't do without it. It would give us a whole $1.3 million. And then we have the levy limits, which is we're more familiar with these now as we're constrained mostly by this. So we can only go up a certain amount based on our net new construction, and you're familiar with the fact that we're a fully built city, so we don't have a lot of net new construction. So if we exceed our levy limit, then we lose state aids. So we're just, as Jason said, handcuffed all the way around.
Our net new construction for this budget is around 0.65%, which is right in line with like average for the city of West Dallas. But you compare that to typical cost increases of 2.5%, it's not going to work. There has been changes to the history of the levy limits over time. Here's just a recap here. There wasn't always a levy limit in place. Back in 2005, it was 2%. And then for a few years there, I think they changed it probably annually. It ranged from 2% to 3.86%. But for the 2012 budgets, they finally got rid of that and just said, no, it's 0% or your net new construction.
And that's really just City of Milwaukee and other inner ring suburbs that's affecting, right? It wouldn't affect, like, say, Franklin. They still have farm fields, obviously, that they're building on.
I think Franklin is doing a little bit better. If you're a growing community, that's not going to be an issue.
Right.
But there are quite a few communities that aren't on a growing trend, even though they're not fully built out. We just so happen that we're just limited because the city is already fully built. Here's a graph of expenditures by department. You guys see this every year. This is also typical for municipalities. Public safety has almost 2/3 of the pie. And then we've got public works with the next biggest piece.
And here's a comparison of 2012 to 2023. So 2012 is notable because that's when the changes to the levy limit occurred with the floor being taken away. So you can see the expenditure or the increases from then. So 2 to 6% depending upon department. For the personnel, we're the recommended budget is taking an additional almost 6 positions, not filled positions, so that would result in 538.65 positions. I believe when I started here, we were at like 580 or something. So we're down from 544 last year, and then we almost 500 are the general fund, which really are affected by the levy limits, and then we have other funding sources, grants and things like that, reimbursements. Here's a snapshot of in 2017 versus 2023, the number of positions, 580, although I came in 2016, but the numbers weren't exactly, they didn't line up from 2012, so I started with 2017, but because that's also been the most significant reductions too. So we've gone down almost 42 positions. The majority of them are in the Public Works Department. And then as a reminder, over 80% of our budget is personnel costs, so the general fund budget, so about $55 million. And just a note about the WRS contributions, they went up quite large, a lot for police and fire for the general fund. General employees, it's a minimal increase. We pay half. For the police, we contribute more, and also for the fire, but fire doesn't participate in Social Security, so that's why there's the difference at the end.
Yeah, so they increased the general employees, the employer contribution went up 0.3%. That's a typical kind of adjustment that I've seen. I've never seen an increase like we have this time around for public safety. The WRS system increased over 1% for each of those categories. That's a significant change in 1 year. I don't know the reason for that. I don't know why it's earmarked only for those 2 categories, but that was a big change.
And so any salary increases are affected. We have to pay more for the WRS. Here's the current OPEB obligations that we're paying for. We have an overall OPEB of over $100 million, but this is what we're projecting for 2023. So you can see the police and fire departments are over $1 million, and the other departments are less. Of note, most of the people in the general departments will work later in their careers. They'll work age 60 or 65. Police and fire, I believe you can retire at 50 for fire and 53 for police.
50 with penalty, 53 without penalty.
That means that you have more employees than. So for this year, we had a gap of 1.3 million. All the challenges that we talked about before result in that gap. We were only able to raise our levy by $215,000, and so we had to fill that gap somehow. So we were able to do that this year through increase in revenues, as I mentioned before. So we had the levy limit allowance, and then the ambulance charges, that was a significant increase, so that's helped. Our interest earnings are estimated to go up, and then parking revenue, but that's offset by additional labor costs. As I mentioned before, there's an estimated 0% increase for 2023 for our health insurance, so that those 2 things saved us. But this is a 1 year, because I don't anticipate that we'll have another 0% increase next year. I think we're still trying to catch up from COVID and things like that. But yeah, so that's how we're able to make it this year. We do have a few position changes that I can go over too. So in the assessor's office, there's a recommendation to move one of the code enforcement positions to the assessor's office to be an assessment technician. We previously had 3 people as admins in code enforcement. Last year we moved one of them to the CSC. This year the recommendation is to move the other to the assessor. They would still be helping out in code enforcement, but with our new software solution and different efficiencies, the need for focus administrative staff is reducing. So the other recommendation is, aside from moving that administrative position, is moving the zoning administrator from the planning and zoning to code enforcement to help focus on the nuisance enforcement activities. Currently that position is not filled and it hasn't been filled all year. There's some changes in the deputy chief positions in mobile integrated health, changing those to captains. Mentioned before the moving of the zoning administrator, the police, there's an elimination of one administrative position, and then there's additional funding for the parking enforcement. Public Works has a few changes again, changing the yard attendant to the truck driver, so for more flexibility, if they need to have more people on the street, then they can close the yard and that person can go out there. Eliminate our HVAC tech, eliminate our inventory services specialists. We have Asset Works in there, and we're implementing a barcode. We've been talking about that for a while, so I'm hopeful that we get that done. And then 3 maintenance repairs, 1 in the sanitation and streets, and 2 in the water department. Some of the benefits of Asset Works managers have been able to look at the different labor and there's a lot of sharing amongst the departments now. Before it was a little more siloed. So, these are specific changes. If you read through the whole budget document, these are on the bottom of each of the departments. So for the IT budget, there you'll see a reduction, but that's because we've moved some software from their department into finance and into the clerk's office. And Asset Works too, to Public Works. So it's not as if they're having an actual decrease. It's just an exchange. And then finance, do you want to
Sure.
talk about that?
So yeah, as Rebecca mentioned, the biggest increase in finance is just the shifting of the financial software costs over to the finance department. But then there was also a grossing up of salaries that we did this year. In prior years, we would take portions of our staff salary, and that would get directly allocated to utilities. Instead, we changed it this year so that salaries are grossed up, so you can see the full cost in the finance department. And then on the back end, there's a revenue reimbursement that comes from the utilities. So just a change in the way that we're accounting for it. I think it brings a little more clarity overall.
Thank you. And then you mentioned in the clerk's office, we're taking the OpenGov software in the budget there, so there's an increase due to that. Police, there's an estimate for a contract increase. We're not sure. We're still negotiating. We have no idea. There's also was an increase in dispatcher salaries this year. And then we talked about the pension already. And then they also had items shifted from IT budget. There's additional $25,000 for the parking enforcement as well as the flock cameras. Any questions so far?
Yeah, Rebecca, you said it. I want to say it again so we all catch this regarding positions. Last year in the last budget, we had to lay off 7 people. This proposed budget reduces positions, but they're open positions, so we're not actually laying anyone off.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Sure.
So one of the efficiencies we're seeing of asset works is we're able to be more efficient at public works with the barcoding of inventory. And this is a benefit of us going online, going away from paper to digital management of our space, of our general processes. So we picked up we were able to gain one position this year. How much longer we're still evolving through this? Are we going to be able to gain more efficiencies in the coming years? Do we know? It's probably a tough question, I bet.
Ongoing, so it's almost one full calendar year that all divisions have implemented ASWorks. So we're hoping within a year to 2 years that we can see some more efficiencies.
One more spot, hopefully. I know we've been in that tough spot here where we were still 1 foot in the past and 1 foot in the future, and we were kind of having to pay for both. And now we're getting caught up on that.
And it's not all technology either, efficiencies, but it's collaboration that Rebecca has mentioned.
Okay.
It's just congrats to the staff, the management staff, the superintendents, supervisors. When there's an issue, it's pretty much everybody does the essential, the work that needs to be done. And then we all kind of collaborate and see who's available.
Yeah.
Now, again, there's certain job tasks that are on hold. Could be for 1 day, 3 days, or 5 days, depending on the urgency.
Yeah, we saw that with
Again,
the tornado
everybody
last week. Yeah.
has been great about patience, so that's the biggest thing. And being a team player, so to speak, realizing that so it takes some time.
Thank you.
I don't know when we changed the CDL requirement, but now all of the employees there are required to have a CDL license so that if we need them to, they can plow. And that was a change from before. And so that's helped a lot
Right.
with
Flexibility.
overtime and flexibility and that kind of thing. So, yeah, so it's a combination.
Okay. Thanks.
The fire department, same with, as with the police department, we're still in negotiations. We continue to have 3 vacant firefighter positions, they're not funded. There's some changes due to grants funding. And then, mentioned before about the pension, retiree benefits, we have those listed in the, I think, police, fire, public works, and the health department.
Yes.
There's line items
Yep.
for each of those departments, so you can see the residual effects of the retirements in those departments specifically.
So overall, the goal with some of these changes is greater transparency in the cost centers. To have, going back to the IT software, to have finance software sitting in IT doesn't help you guys, but if you put it in finance, okay, that makes more sense. And it's the same thing with these retiree benefits. If it's just commingled in a general department, it doesn't really paint a picture. So we're trying to put costs where we can make better decisions.
And I think it helps us also with a message to people on the state level about what we're focusing on and what the situations that we're dealing with here. The health department, there's a lot of changes there regarding with the Kogan grants and things like that. So we were phasing out people being on a lot of the grants, so there's an increase in their salaries this year, but it's not an increase in people, it's just them coming off the grant. And then the retiree benefits. So the library, they've reduced a lot of part-time staffing there. I think they've been looking at reducing the number of people at their circulation desk and the front desk, so that has helped reduce a lot of their part-time positions. Talked about the public works. It's been very challenging in the public works department to maintain employees or retain them. We're fighting not only against other municipalities, but other levels of government and other, the private sector. So we've been losing people. We can't even compete with, they're getting $10 or $15 more an hour. And just from a internal equity perspective, we can't give that person that, because then we be giving it to everyone else, and then there's just a huge ripple effect. But as the mayor mentioned, we're hoping somewhat with a more reasonable annual increase. Plus, we've been doing market adjustments. The council's been approving those as we need to. I believe there's one tomorrow night, mechanics. So we appreciate the support in that, in those. It's been a huge challenge for Public Works, and I think as going into winter, the mechanics, it's gonna be a struggle. We're down 3.
3, yeah. So we currently only have 3 mechanics. We used to have a total of 7. So it's going to be kind of trying, so to speak. Hopefully we'll have a light winter. Not that much.
So that's why that file is before you tomorrow night for adjusting those. Engineering, there's been a lot of looking at billing out to the projects and to the different water and things like that. So there's a more accurate billing out. So there's a reduction in their salaries. Anything to add?
We try and look at the prior year's history when it comes to the putting together the budget, and the engineers keep track in very detailed the hours that they spend on all the different projects and utilities, so they can look back in the last year and go, oh yeah, we're seeing an increasing trend in the number of hours that we're spending on utility work, and then we just make that adjustment every year in the budget.
And that's another department that we have challenges recruiting for engineers. Promotions, there's an increase for part-time marketing, a market attendant. We have a lot more events going on at the farmers market, so this person will be supporting those activities. And then communications, previously they were in their own special revenue fund because we would get franchise fees, and so they were kept out of the general fund, but then the franchise fees, part of them got paid to us as a revenue. So this budget recommends bringing them back into the general fund, and the impact is minimal because we already get the revenue. We're still getting the revenue that we were getting before. It's just not going kind of in a circle. So
Part of the reason for making this change too is those franchise fees have been on a downward trend since 2012, and at some point operating the communications fund as a separate fund just isn't going to be sustainable anymore. And we have, from a technical perspective, a lot of capacity from the expenditure side because of ERP to be able to just merge this in, and then it's not going to be an issue.
there's a little bit more about our revenues. Our taxes are estimated at 42 million. 13 million for grants and aids, a little over 2 million for license permits, almost 2 million for fines and forfeitures. We have charges for services, and then a little over 3 million for miscellaneous. Did you want to talk about the charges for services a little bit?
I guess I'll add that the ambulance revenues, so that large increase of 660,000 estimated because of the Medicaid, additional Medicaid money that we're getting, that's included in that charges for services line item.
And then here are the expenditures. We have general government about $10 million, public safety almost 40 million, public works 12.5, health and human services, which is essentially the health department at 2.1. Culture and recreation, 2.4, I believe that's the library and the senior center, and conservation and development at 645, that's planning and development department. We've broken that out separately. I believe that's actually a separate category for the state reporting for the budget, correct?
You talking about the health one?
And the
And conservation and development. Yeah, if you look at the statutes, these are the category requirements that the state has.
So we're following those at this point, so. Here's the history and the, I'll let Jason do this since there's lots of numbers on it.
Sure. Equalized value in the top left there is probably this might be the biggest increase we'll ever see. That was 15%. Moving over to assessed value, completely different way of valuing the property. You can see that it doesn't go up at that whole 15% mark. But our tax rate, looking at going from $12.02, I'm estimating to go to $12.12. Moving on down to the bottom, this is my best guess, because I don't know what the levies are going to be for all of the other taxing jurisdictions, but estimating $27.87 on the total tax rate, and then just a recap of historical general fund budgets.
So as the mayor mentioned before, there's recommended budget has an increase of $15 on the average home of $150,000. So their tax, the city portion of the taxes would be $1,818.
And that's $150,000 of assessed
Assessed
value,
value.
Correct.
not fair market value.
Yes. So the next steps, if there's a meeting needed next Monday, we could have one. We're waiting to get additional information from the state so we can calculate the final tax rate. The public hearing, as mentioned, is on November 1st, and then the council will consider and vote on the budget on November 15th. Did you have any questions for us?
Mr. Chair?
Alderman Weigel.
Not so much a question, just a comment. Alderperson Rote and I attended a, neighborhood meeting, whatever it's called, last week. It was hosted by the two county supervisors that cover West Allis. And much of it was devoted to the exact same thing about how the county is hamstrung by the funding. And they have all the same problems as far as retaining staff and all that. So this is not peculiar to West Allis, nor even village towns, municipalities, or cities. This is the state of Wisconsin, how they're treating all of the other units of government here, and we're all in similar boats, not the same boat because we're built out. And on the staffing issue, just one interesting thing, I had asked how there's a private Hoyt Park pool is run separately, and they managed to somehow staff their lifeguards, whereas many of us know that there was a lifeguard shortage. It was said at the meeting that the lifeguards at Hoyt Park make $33 an hour.
What?
Whoa.
They hiring?
That's you're not the only person to say that.
And they feed them.
And they get free pizza too.
They feed them.
Yeah. So this is the world we're living in right now. Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
Lord.
So
And I'll add about the county situation. The county has a wheel tax too.
well, I was going to ask that up. Well, we're going to call it vehicle registration fee, right? Don't say wheel tax.
Wheel tax.
Wouldn't solve our problem.
Wouldn't solve our problem.
No, because most of that is outside of the levy.
Yeah. Yeah.
The debt service.
So.
And it probably would, and it's just impactful for the residents. It's not, a citywide. We talked about the other options.
Sharing the pain.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, the next slide is just some information. I had this on last year. People wonder why you spend money on the signs or murals or Burnham streetscaping. There's different funding sources for these type of things, or prioritization of neighborhoods and just revitalization. So I just thought I would put that in there again. I'm sure there'll be some other questions about why we're spending money on something, but these are common things that come up.
Yeah. Alderman salaries. Yeah. That too.
That's all we have for our presentation.
I do have two more comments. So we pretty much covered the general fund, the general operations of the city. Included in the overall budget, though, if you think about the utilities, there's going to be, we're going to recommend 2 rate increases. The sanitary utility hasn't had a rate increase since, I think, 2018, and at that time it was 20 cents. We're going to be recommending the same increase for 2023, and I believe the estimated average impact to a resident is going to be about $20. Also for 2023, in the 2023 budget for the solid waste utility, we're recommending, I think it's, I don't know the exact, unfortunately I don't have the exact figure here, but I think it's going to be about a $30 annual increase for the garbage and recycling. What's driving that one in particular is the dumping fees. We have a new contract that we signed this year, and we're now getting the full impact of that finally starting in 2023.
Yeah, specifically recycling, we were getting that for free. We didn't have to pay anything, and now we have to pay to do our recycling.
And they probably have to pay their drivers like $33.
Fuel and payroll costs are going up for across the town.
Something.
Any other questions?
Question, Mr. Chair?
Please.
Not really a question, more of a statement. I was happy to see that the positions that are being eliminated weren't filled. It was tough last year having to make those decisions, and I'm happy that the focus is still on the employees, and the increases, quality employees is huge. You know, looking around the internet, you're correct. It's a hard market to compete with. So what we can do to retain and keep the employees happy and here, I fully support. So I appreciate staff and leaders taking into account, and I hope city employees realize that. Last year we were a little bit more handcuffed, and as you can see this year, I feel like staff and everyone went above and beyond to retain what we had, and that they are truly appreciated. So I think that'll help and show. And I'm curious to see how that sterilization goes.
You and me both.
When I first read it, I'm like, what are we giving them, baths? Like, we got little rat baths, you know. So.
I can send you the link if you're interested. It's
I am.
kind of fascinating, I guess I'd say, and it's just never. I mean, I've done so much research, and I know the health department has too, on what are other cities doing, and then one of our posts on the efforts that we've been taking on this year to tackle it. Somebody sent me a message, I believe it was through Facebook, and just said, "Have you seen this?" And I was like, "Nope," but I'm very intrigued.
Nice. Yeah, if you could send that to me.
Sure.
Thanks.
And on that subject too, I want to add, that's something that we as alder people, and you, Mayor, I know here, it's probably the number 1 or number 2 issue is rats that we hear from our constituents. And I think it is important that we're able to show folks, well, this is concrete what we're doing, this is what's happening. I think doing something and looking into this and having a funding source is a great idea.
If I could, Mr. Chair, just on that note, anyone here who's done a walk along with the environmentalists knows that it's not just going to be the city fixing this problem. We need every resident and business to be part of the solution. And if some of the yards and alleys I saw and the condition they were kept in earlier this year, walking around, it gave me little hope that we'd ever get where we'd like to be on this unless people really start helping us out.
Right on that. I hope that we enforce the new ordinance a little bit more rather than sending a letter. They'll end up in the garbage that the rat takes to their little home.
To make a nest.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
Oh, I just wanted to mention, I think there's been a lot of collaboration with the rodent abatement efforts this year. The departments have really stepped up and worked together, and that's really been helpful in addressing that and I guess illustrating to our residents that it is a priority for the city. So I just really appreciate all their their hard
Efforts.
work and working together.
All right. So do we need another meeting next Monday?
What would be to talk about?
The same thing that we're talking about right now, and I'm thinking no, if I could lead the committee that way.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
before we wrap up, I just wanted to thank Jason and Chris again for all their hard work. It's
Chris
been- I
Moan?
won't-
Is-
yes.
yeah,
I
okay.
won't say it's been a pleasure to do the budget this year, but it's been 1,000% better than it has been in the past years, and that's not, and I'm not talking about the difficult decisions, I'm talking about just the administrative and the legwork of putting things together. They've really done a lot to make it easier for me and the departments. I think everyone in this room would agree our capital improvement process and the budget process has greatly improved over the last 2 years. So thank you.
Thank you, and thanks to Chris. She did a ton of work this year, and even with all the work that she did designing a new process, she said we were still ahead of where we were in prior years, so it's good.
All right. Anything else to come before the committee?
Move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned.